Good evening and welcome to Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haines, former UCLA jumper, longtime coach, and just a total fanatic on all the jumps and throws and field events and track and field. Tonight, I have a long-awaited guest. I had the pleasure of talking with, and I'm looking forward to, Steve Tully, who his brother Mike and he both went to Millikan High School in Long Beach, which is where I went to high school. And Mike went on to being an Olympic silver medalist, as well as a UCLA. So the Millikan UCLA connection between Mike, myself, another high jumper named Rory Katinik went to Millikan and then went to UCLA. They were both before my time. And then myself, and then Dwayne Washington, my first year roommate, triple jumper at also UCLA. So the Millikan UCLA connection there. And Steve went to Long Beach City and then went to Arizona State and has been a very good high jumper, was the school record holder there for a while. And then, once he got done competing, started coaching. So he's got a wealth of experience, been coaching a little bit longer than I have, also was a teacher like myself and just recently retired. And so now he's still coaching. And I don't think we're going to get that out of him anytime soon. He has a lot of fun, great guy, has a lot of fun with his kids and just does superior work. He's routinely kicking out 15, 16-foot vaulters in high school. They'll, do well at CIF out here in California and then go to the state meet. So anyway, we're looking forward to talking with Steve. So as soon as we get him in the waiting room here, we'll get started. So we'll go to our first commercial break. And when we come back, we'll be with Steve Tully. So good evening and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haines, and I'm here tonight with a special guest, a good friend. I spent a couple of years coaching with here in the Southern California area. His name is Steve Tully. He is the brother to a Mike Tully, which some of you would know, some of you wouldn't know. But Steve, how you doing this evening?
Great.
It's been a bit. I think it's a couple of years now already since I left the Los Alamitos fold.
Yeah.
So I heard you had a lifestyle change.
I did.
You did.
I don't know. What do you mean lifestyle change?
Lifestyle, you're done working, right? You're done teaching?
Yeah. I'm still coaching, but I retired from teaching. So
You're retired from teaching. Okay. So for those of you out there listening, we've had a few pole vaulters here on the show before. We've had Sean Francis, who does Team Hootie pole vault. See his work on both Instagram and YouTube. And then I've had Mike Ashton, who was coaching at Utah Valley and now is back on the East Coast. And I believe this will be at least 3 pole vault coaches. So we have the famous Steve Tully. So you are a legend here to me anyway. I grew up in the Long Beach area, which I know you did too. Where'd you go to high school? Tell everybody when you went to high school.
I went to Millikan High School. Back in those days, it was 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Yeah, me too. Two of my years. My senior year, they changed over to the 4-year finally. But you went there 3 years, and then the Tullys were legendary in my area. Even though I never got to see any of you guys, I was too far behind you. Only a couple years, but just far enough where we never crossed paths. The Tullys and the Thilkins were the ones that we always heard about. So, and then I think is it you or Mike that holds the school record in the pole vault?
My brother Mike holds the Millikan record.
Uh-huh.
And he was at UCLA, and I went to Long Beach City, and then I went over to Arizona State.
Arizona State, yeah. I read a little bit of your bio. You're still all over the Long Beach City page as I looked you up on the internet, so I could get all the background. So when you went through high school, then were you I know you didn't just pole vault, so I know you vaulted, but then did you just do the vault in high school, or did you branch out then? Because I know you did some other events later on?
Actually, I did a little bit of a high jump in
Hmm.
high school, but not much. I didn't really branch out into other things until I got to Long Beach City. Then I started throwing javelin too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
main thing was pole vault. Second, I was pretty good javelin and not too bad at high jumping either.
Okay. Awesome. And then in high school, how'd you do? Were you a CIF champ? Did you go all the way to state? How did that all pan out?
Yeah, I I won CIF for 4A, and then I went to state, and I think I took third at Arcadia, and
Uh-huh.
I had Anthony Curran, who's UCLA grad. He was national record holder at the time, so
Right.
he was really good. So
Yeah.
fast, and he was good. So I think I ended up taking sixth or something at state, and
Uh-huh.
then
Okay.
and after that, I sat out a year. I was hurt. My knees got bad, so I was hurt for a
Right.
while.
Okay. So your senior year, no vaulting, or you graduated and then took a year off before you did any college work?
Exactly. I
Okay.
graduated, then I took a year off. I had knee problems, and then I went to Long Beach City,
Right.
and still had knee problems my first year, but I competed through it, and and it did okay, did pretty good there. And
Yeah.
then Ron Alice, that he was USC's coach,
Yes.
was telling me, "Hey, why don't you go throw javelin? I need some points for against, I think it was uh, Pasadena, their arch rival." So
Right. Right.
I threw javelin there, and next thing you know, I'm a 2 event guy, and
Right.
then my high jump kept getting better. So then it was just agonizing because I was hurt most of the time. So
Yeah.
that was a big setback. It put me back a couple of years, actually, I think.
Really. So
Yeah.
you vaulted, how high did you vault in high school?
High
Coming
school,
from state?
15.6.
15.6.
So, yeah.
Took a year off. Then you went to Long Beach City, where I
Yeah.
think I had you topped out at 18.2. Is that right?
No. I jumped
No?
17 at
17.
Long Beach City,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that's still the record there. And
All right.
then off to Arizona State,
Okay.
and
And
I
that's
held the record. I held the record there for about 9 years until Nick Heisung, Olympic gold medalist, broke my record there. So
okay. Yeah, it's great company to be in, right? It
yeah,
takes an Olympian to come take your school record away from you. And
yeah.
then was that the 18.2?
No. I jumped 17.5 there, 17.4 and
Mhm.
3/4.
Okay.
And then went to NCAA Division I in Eugene and was eighth place, which is got me the last All American spot.
Last All-American. I know that one well. Yeah, I took ninth my senior year. So
Yeah.
I was a day late and a dollar short. Yeah. Okay.
And you know, I used to be known as Mike's younger brother. Mike was just, my brother was unbelievable. I mean, he's one of the
Yeah.
best pole vaulters of all time, in my opinion.
Right.
But with, you know, at NCAA's, the current world record holder, his dad, Greg Duplantis,
Right.
was ninth place right after me.
Okay.
So, and he was pretty good too.
Hmm.
And that's my claim to fame now, that I beat Mondo Duplantis' dad
Beat the world record
by
holders.
one spot at the NCAAs, and kept him out of an All American spot for that
All
year.
right. All right. Yeah. And then they're from France, right? Duplantis?
Well, his mom's from Sweden, but they grew up in Louisiana. They went to
Okay.
LSU,
Okay.
you know. So
Mondo. Okay. And then where am I getting 18.2 from? Did you ever get over 18.2?
no, I mean, I had some good jumps in practice that were that high. You know, had some good tailwinds some days, but
Right.
never really happened in a meet. So.
Okay. Okay. I don't know where I saw that. I could have sworn when I popped off with 18.2, because I've been back to Long Beach City just recently.
Yeah.
With the new track and everything. And I was looking up on the board there, but maybe my eyes don't work as well as they used to. So, well, then you started, once you got through with your degree, You and I were talking one time, and you brought up the name of Tellez and talking about Houston and everything like that. So what was your connection to all that, and how did you not end up out at Houston?
Well, my brother's coach was Tom Telez all the way up until my brother was a senior at
Hmm.
UCLA, and then Tom took was he was the assistant coach at UCLA, and then he took the head coach job up in at University of Houston. So
Right.
clearly, I had a connection there. So I took a recruiting trip out there, but I'm a Southern Cal guy, and it's pretty humid there, and
Right.
I couldn't see myself. Yeah, I took that trip in June or July, and it was so humid. I got off the plane and just almost got right back on it because that's about how I go. I
Yeah.
don't know about this,
Yeah.
So that was pretty much the reasoning behind that. But
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I remember my senior year at UCLA, we went to SMU for an invite, and it was only, I'm going to say April, and it was already pretty roasting in Fort Worth. So I got off the plane and I had that same reaction. I was like, wow, it is hot and humid here. And it was like, I think I jogged one lap in warm up, or maybe like three-quarters of a lap, and I shut it down. I just said, you know what? I'm warm. I got over to the high jump pit and I laid down and I kind of stretched a little bit, but I really didn't do a whole lot. And it was actually pretty good for competition, to go there. But I did not spend more than, I can honestly say I think I spent about 5 minutes warming up. It was just like warming up in a sauna.
yeah,
So yeah, I get that. Not going to Houston. So that was the brush with the great Tom Telez. So okay. Um, these are all these things I think I've told you before, Steve, that I've kind of caught up on the way everything happened. And the other story of my life is how I just missed all these different things, by just a little bit. So Doug Nordquist was coached by James Kiefer, and Kiefer used to be at UCLA also. And so I'm not sure. I think the Kiefer Nordquist connection happened somewhere else than UCLA. Obviously, I think he had gone to Fullerton by then, or I don't know where he went after UCLA, but he worked with Doug there, either at the JC or something, because then Doug went up to Washington. But I know he did a lot of work with Jim, and then so that's one famous UCLA jumps coach that I didn't meet till way after the fact. And then Tom Telez obviously had left, like you said, went to Houston and created, who Carl Lewis and Leroy Burrell, among others, right? Plenty of high names, and in a variety of events. Like you're saying, he coached your brother to, world class, pole vault, but was also sprints and long jump and high jumpers. I jumped against a guy named Mark Reed that he coached, who beat me. I PR'd twice my last meet as a senior at UCLA, and I still lost. I came in second to him. So yeah, Tom Telez. Wow, he's a legend for creating outrageous athletes. All right, well, we caught up on history there really quickly. Now, when you started coaching, how quickly after you were done at Arizona State?
well, I started doing some sales right out of I'm a what do you call adrenaline junkie, clearly. So I started with doing some sales and stuff like that. I'm not really a salesman. So
Right.
I, I ended up joining the Army. And so I ended up jumping out of airplanes at the
Okay.
82nd Airborne Division for 4 years doing that. And then
All right.
after that, I got out and I thought, well, what am I going to do? And teaching was available. I went to this headhunter thing. He gave me one of these tests and said, hey, you should be like a coach or teacher like that. So I kind of went into that, and I've been there ever since. I think I started back at Millikan for a year or two, and
Okay.
then I went over to La Salle. I've been coaching at La Salle for since 2000, so like 24 years or so,
Wow. Okay.
and just retired from regular teaching. I was doing computer programming,
Uh-huh.
teaching coding and stuff like that to kids and stuff like
Okay.
that.
Awesome. So
So,
that, wow.
I got a couple good kids right now, so we'll see what happens this year. A couple juniors and
Well, you
seniors.
always have a couple kids. I haven't seen you, really languishing down at the bottom of your profession. You usually have a couple kids up there that are competing for CIF titles and running off the state. So that's
Yeah.
it was always fun to hang out and catch up. So I've just started my pole vaulting career, and I know just enough probably to get somebody killed. So I've been dying to go through it, and with a technician like yourself, and you have a way of talking, I know, to the kids, and I think that's where the teaching background helps, right? Because you can communicate, with these kids because you've been in the classroom long enough, and you probably learned enough about different learning styles and whatever to, okay, here's what I'm trying to get to you, right? And some of them pick it up right away, and some of them look at you cross-eyed, right? There's the kinesthetic learners, and then there's the the visuals, and you go across the board. I recently started working with a kid who I literally can't get him to make eye contact with me. So I don't know if it's just, this generation of looking at the phones and, just kind of wondering, but there's every once I'm like, hey, you gotta look at this for a second. I'm trying to get you to change this one thing. And he's just really could care less about what it is that I'm trying to show him, and then I think he's a kind of kinesthetics feel person. I haven't figured it all out yet because I can't get him to communicate either. So, well, what do you think is, what was my question about that? I wanted to see if there's a way to get into that encyclopedia of pole vaulting that's in your head, because I've been learning by watching it. I think it's got to be one of the most sequential events that there are, as all the field events are, I think, from beginning to end, right? If you watch a shot putter or a javelin thrower, a pole vaulter, there's like a beginning where you're running, doing something, and then you get, in pole vault, you're sticking a pole in a box, and javelin, you're reaching back and throwing a javelin. Shot or disc, you're letting an implement go, right? Everything's always about an approach. You're either spinning or running or doing something, and then some incredibly technical thing happens, that results in all these great things. So I think when I was working with you last, I remember seeing that one kid. You had a surfer kid who, everybody that I watch would run through and take their plant, and they would drive that knee up, right? Drive it up and then swing, and you had this one kid that every time I watched him, he just had absolutely no knee drive at all, right? And you told me, you said, I remember this one guy that didn't have any knee drive and vaulted really high. And I think I actually came across his video. It was going through Instagram just the other day. For some reason, I remember I was watching it and I was like, oh my gosh, it could be this guy. Because I think he vaulted like 18, something, or he's pretty high up there. And I was watching going, well, how does that work then? Because my mind is like, okay, everybody's, you might go to different schools of how you put your plant up or whatever. I don't even know. Are there any differences there? But how does that work for you, Steve, when you're working with these kids? How do you start them? Do you start in the beginning, like they just learn how to carry the pole, or what do you do?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of basics, how to hold the pole, to make it easier to run with. We do a lot of pole runs, and then there's it all starts in the run and plant. I spend most of my time just teaching them how to run and plant with the pole correctly, and
Right.
that transition between the run and then the takeoff of that plant phase is really key. And
Yeah.
it's not an easy thing to do. It's fear is a big factor in
Sure.
how they come into the box, and it's got it's a lot of repetition and a lot of pole runs, and just a lot of drills that they have to accomplish before they can get off the ground.
Yeah.
That's about 90% of the vault. The vault happens so fast, like you were saying earlier, where then some technical thing happens, really, really quickly,
Yeah.
but it is the vault only, from takeoff to the very top of the vault's only about 1.1 seconds. And it doesn't happen. It's very quick. So you got to run fast, and then you got to plant the pole efficiently. Make sure that you get that transition so you don't slow down too much.
Right. Can't be under, right? Because if you're under,
can't be under, you can't be too far out. I mean, there's just a lot of sequence of events, and the biggest part is when do you start your plant? When do you get it? The pole starting to move, and that's
right.
that's very important. If you run by that one, that starting that point where you're supposed to start your plant, it's almost impossible to recover from that. You have to start moving that pole on a certain step, and those hands and feet have to be what I call in sync together.
Right.
So the hands, there's a 3-step last plant phase where that left foot hits, and your hands have to start moving, and then your right penultimate hits, and your hands should be at a certain spot. So it's like little milestones of where those hands need to be,
right,
to make a successful transition, so you don't slow down and stuff like that. So, and running style, because the pole vault's a little different. You have that weight out in front of you, so you gotta run with those knees up high, and make sure your heels don't want to loop your heels too much behind you. I mean, it's just like a sprinting style, but a little bit adjusted to the weight for the pole in front of you.
Okay. So you're not going to rear cycle as much. You're not going to get the heels to the glutes. You're going to keep them kind of more.
Yeah, you want the heels to come up to the underneath, your butt there area, but I mean, you don't want to cycle way behind you.
Yeah, not like a 400
needs to be more everything kind of up in front of you. Those knees up and the leg, the comes down. But yeah, it's you gotta work on a lot of different factors there in the sprinting style, and then the lowering of the pole, or the pole drop, and gravity has a lot to do with it, because that also has to be at the pole tip has to be at the right height when you make that transition from the run to the plant.
Right.
If it's too high, it can mess it up. Too low, it can mess it up. So everything's, it's all about timing and syncing those hands and feet together. It's almost like a dance. You got to just make sure that everything flows right, so you don't lose that energy.
Yeah. So the speed I get is important, and then because who was the guy that was for years Bubka? Watching Bubka, all I ever heard about was how he was so fast, and they said he can run like a 10-400 meters with a pole in his hand. And I'm like, is that real? Could you really run that fast?
I don't know about that. I mean, I'm sure he ran 10-400 meters, which is fast. And
sure.
You got to have speed. In the old days, you could get away with maybe not as much speed, as long as you're a really good technician. And that's kind of where I didn't have the speed that some of these guys had. And I worked on it really hard, but speed's something. Technique's a lot too. But nowadays they're jumping so high. You got to have speed. You got to have strength, and you got to have technique. You got to have it all to jump the heights that they're jumping now.
Yeah. Well,
you can't be deficient anywhere. At all.
So on the magic checklist, I have this for my high jumpers. I'm like, okay, so I'll tell them sometimes, because sometimes they're not hitting all of them. I go, my magic checklist is you're 6'8", you're really, really thin, you run super tall and fast, you're very, very flexible, and you're explosive. You got a great knee drive. So I'll say those things would be ideal. And I go, okay, so you're 5'2", and you're really, really slow. So, what are we going to do to fix the magic checklist? So I start talking to him about, hey, why don't we run with our knees up? Why don't we get way up on our toes? Why don't we learn how to cycle? And you start going through, you say, okay, that would be great. So for the pole vault, with what you just said, I would imagine, speed is up there on the list, and you talked about technique. What kind of athlete are you looking for? Like I've heard the talk about, gymnasts or, other types. What if you were to have your magic checklist, what would you put on there for your best pole vaulter type?
Well, you know, it's a lot of application of force. So I've seen small guys jump super high. I've seen really big guys jump super high, but the ones that tend to transition and uh, a lot of it has to do with not having any fear,
Yeah.
coming into that takeoff and just be fearless.
Yeah.
Can be super fast, but if you're slowing down because you're afraid and backing off, it's not gonna come out too good for you.
Right. Right.
So the technique can always be taught, and there's also a part of the vault where you kind of have to have a real good sense of where you are in the air. So, which is basically peripheral vision kind of stuff going on. So, I mean, you don't want to be rocking back and going up the pole when you haven't made it into the pit yet.
Right. Right.
We've all seen scary jumpers. Sometimes I think, pole vaulting's not for everybody. I mean, it's for, semi crazy people, or real.
Right.
It's almost the crazier you are, the better you're going to be.
Right.
So, but there's a part to it where if it can be done safely, where you just gradually, you just go through the plant phase, here, do 1, 2, 3, and just start out with 1 step, 2 step, till they, kids get their confidence up, and then,
Right.
and then just slowly move them back. So, you're not going to kill anybody. You just don't have, some kids will just grab the pole and want to just get back there and just, try and run and take. I mean, you got to do it safely.
Right. Right. Well, so with that awareness, gymnasts, acrobats, like someone who, is not afraid of going upside down, like you said, and, inverting and shooting up the pole and then, flipping around. That's pretty crazy. I like what you said about the craziness part, because I always tell my high jumpers, I said, now, they look at me like I'm crazy. And I go, look, my goal for you is to get you to operate at as much speed as you can handle and still get ready to jump and transfer your speed into lift, and that's going to change for everybody depending on a bunch of things. So, but I need you to run fast and take off. And, a lot of times one of my pet peeves, one of the things that's hardest for me to train out of jumpers is being too close to the bar. So many people have learned how to manipulate their body in space, basically, and kind of what I call finagle their way over the bar. They're not really jumping as much as they are, contorting. Like, okay, so that's great. You have a great contortion move. Congratulations. Now the bar is going up. What are you going to do? The bar just went up 2 more inches. You just finagled your way over with no knee drive and no speed. Your layout is really, really good. I said on my list, that's the last thing on the list. It's number 5. So how do we get you over the next 2 inches? I go, can you improve on your layout? Can you start it any earlier and hold it any longer? And you catch them looking at you, and I'm trying to make a point here. I'm like, we need to milk the other cows in what you're doing. I go, there's 5 cows for me: straight, curve, takeoff, flight. We've got a lot of other things that we can work on. Your layout is already pretty good. So let's leave that alone for now and teach you how to do this. And so they fight, right? They fight. I move them farther away from the bar, and they're sitting there slowing down, like you said, or they don't go full blast through there. And their fear is that they're not going to make it into the pit. And my argument is momentum is never defeated. You are running pretty much straight at the pit. You make a slight left or a slight right, but you're on a collision course with the middle of the pit. You can't miss unless you do a bunch of things wrong at that point. So I'm like, we're trying to actually change your trajectory into, going up. But man, they fight, and I'm like, you got to be a little bit crazy, to be a high jumper, because there's some people that never get over that. Once the bar gets above some people's heads, they don't pull the trigger anymore, because it's unassailable to them. I've had, both guys and girls that'll run up 5 times in a row and not pull the trigger, And I'm like, well, if you're standing right next to it, first of all, that makes it look higher. So let's try moving back. And that, for some people, that's just worse. They can't do it, So I always tell them, I go, pole vaulters are the craziest. I go, you guys are a close second. You still have to have some guts to run fast and, trust that you're going to not smash into the bar or land on it or whatever. Right. So, craziness is a it's a definite requirement.
It's what's I think a little bit unique about the pole vault is that when I was younger, I was elementary school and all that. I didn't really realize it, but I was like a little monkey, on the high bars and whatever else. And when we got to the pole vault, everything was kind of easy, but I didn't really realize that until I got to where I was coaching for a few years and I started getting kids on the high bar. And I'm like, man, some of these kids don't have the strength
right
to really to get inverted, to get upside down. They don't have the shoulder strength or the core strength or some of those stuff that I just took for granted, because by the time I started vaulting, I go, this is great. I mean, I could do giants and flyaways and I could do anything I wanted on a high bar already. And climb ropes and do anything like that. And I just assumed all kids were like that, but I found out very quickly that a lot of them didn't have the core strength. They didn't have the or the shoulder strength or whatever it was that you could do to be. And I think it comes back to your point about gymnastics, background. You kind of have to be gymnastics. You got to have be as strong like a weightlifter, and then you got to have that plyometric strength, to be able to jump. One of the reasons I was a high jumper at first in junior high. They didn't have pole vault. Then I couldn't jump that high, but I mean, I ended up jumping pretty high for my height, I guess, but I didn't have the pop, natural pop like some kids did. But it's in vault is kind of unique with that. You gotta have that core strength. You gotta have the shoulder strength and be able to really know how to swing really hard. And that's the other part about the vault is after you take off is the only thing that really adds more to the vault is how hard you can swing. And that was one of my fortes and my brothers was, we may not have been that as fast as some of the other ones, but we could definitely swing as hard or harder than almost anybody. And, what keeps that pole bent is how hard you can swing. That's one thing off the ground and bending it, but then how do you keep it bent while you're still trying to get upside down? So you got to keep that pole bent, keep it compressed or bent as much as possible, and keep that cord short. The cord that from the top hand to the butt plug, where the that's what's called the cord. And when you swing really hard, that pole stays compressed until you can get in that really good launch position to start your inversion and that get a good get in line with that pole and getting a big old get a nice handstand on top of that pole. That's basically what you want to do.
Right. So my question then is, like, you stuck your plant and you drive that knee and you leave your leg behind you, right? You don't want to foil that up right away. You leave it pointed and then you swing. You want to have the swing. Now, does the swing want to be longer then? Like, do you want to be able to extend the swing so that you're pulling on the top of the pole longer with your weight, or how does that?
Well, you just want to be able to, you want to swing that some people drop their lead leg and swing both legs, like you're talking about the other guy. Even a lot it's becoming a little more popular nowadays. You can, if you're strong enough to swing two legs, that's even two legs partially bent. They're starting to do that nowadays. In the old days where we were out, we would try to keep one leg straight and swing it as hard as you can.
Right.
That swinging action kind of connects pretty much right before the box, where when that leg hits, it's called a tap. Kind of same thing like on a high bar, where you you want to swing it as hard and as fast as you possibly can, and then turn everything up to the top hand as quick as you can. You know, not a long, slow swing.
Okay. So
about a violent tap as hard as you possibly can to keep that pole compressed, so you can get back in a hurry, because that vault doesn't take that long.
Right. Now, when you're up here and you're driving that knee up and you start to swing, are you going to pull on the pole, or are you just swing? How do you swing your
swing to the top hand? Swing to the top hand. You don't want to pull down, and you know, you just take off and you just got to swing to the top hand. You don't ever want to pull. That'll stop pretty much everything.
Okay. So when you're, the next question I have then is, if you want to swing your feet up to where your hands are.
Yeah.
That's going to be, are you bent at the hips once you swing, or are you going to swing it all the way around and then up on top?
No, when you tap, your leg's going to hit the bottom, and then you're going to be in a straight line with that cord through your shoulders and through your hips and your leg. But as soon as that tap happens, that's when your legs come up first, and then your shoulders, and then everything, trying to get back as fast as you can and get back as far as you can, get on, you know, making sure that you connect with that top hand.
Yeah. Okay.
So you don't want to do it long and slow. And I mean, it needs to hit that tap, those legs come up, and you know, get on top of that pole, and just, it's like what do they call that? Chain, continuous chain. So the momentum never stops and sits and waits.
Yeah.
All the way. Just keep moving.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do these last couple of years. I haven't changed my philosophies, anything in the high jump, but I was a 2-arm power guy. And I've really been watching the Europeans and watching the single armers, you know, and I'm like, why is it the single, you know, so successful for them? Because I catch some of them, I go, they don't really look like they're jumping. They just look like they're running off the ground, you know, like there's no, it looks effortless sometimes, you know, they're really fast and they're leaning and they just do and they're up, and you're like, wow, I didn't really know they were going to jump. They didn't, you know, the power jumpers, they tell you, it's like they gather their arms together, they swing them back, and they drive everything up, you know, and it's easy to see, but there's only a few that do that really fast, you know, so they're mostly cruising. What was I going to ask you? I think, I don't remember when it was. It had to be after I'd left Milliken, but I came back one day and I knew who your brother was. And I think I'd even seen him. I had to have seen him training at UCLA with Curran. And I was back at Milliken for some reason, and I could swear he came by and needed to vault somewhere and came in with his poles, because I've told the story before. But I remember he'd only been there a little bit. He warmed up, and everybody's kind of watching him. Oh, that's Tully. Okay, yeah. And then he just went charging down the runway and hit his plant and started rocking back, and boom, like pole just exploded, right? And he did like a double backflip and landed in the pit, you know. And I remember everybody's watching, and my definition of a pole vaulter, where most people would be left quivering and trembling and shaking, you know, and scared to death of possibly ever vaulting again. Your brother, as I remember, picked up the pieces, threw them away, then went back to his bag, slid out another pole, and walked back to the end of the runway and went running down the runway again after about a 30-second wait. You know, I remember watching that going, yeah, that makes sense. You know, it's like, you could tell it wasn't his first rodeo. It was not the first pole that had been broken, you know. But for some people, that's devastating, right?
Yeah, I broke quite a few poles myself, but you know, what are you gonna do? You gotta. I broke a pole in a competition and grabbed the next pole and jumped. And you just got it. You know, you can't. It's one of those no fear things again. You know.
Yeah.
You're not gonna. That's not gonna keep somebody from doing it. You know. I mean, it's just part of the game.
Part of the deal, right? It's what you signed on for.
Yeah, it's you know, you got to have, you know, Got to have balls, I guess.
Right.
Can I say that on air?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. We'll see. I haven't had anything edited out on YouTube yet. We'll have to see. I don't know how close they can listen to a hour-long podcast and catch one word. So yeah, well, that fear, channeling it into one thing. But man, what was the point? The fearlessness is one thing, speed, coordination. It's got to be one of the great events to watch. I know what I was going to ask you. These guys that are vaulting over 20 feet now, Mondo has beaten, Bubka's record, which I remember thinking that was never going to happen. And then, because I lost track of how many times Bubka broke his own record, right? He was like Alexiev, the lifter. Yeah. Remember that guy? Because I know every centimeter, right? Every little centimeter that he went up, they would pay him, right?
Oh yeah.
There were bonuses, right, for breaking your own world record. So he shattered the world record by like 20 inches. He took it up a centimeter at a time and kept getting paid, right? So I think that was the part I wasn't paying as much attention to until I heard about it later, because I was like, didn't he break his own world record a ton of times? He's like, yeah, he did. I think Alexiev, the weightlifter guy that we used to see on Wild World of Sports, right, the big fat, he did his own world record like 75 or 80 times. I mean, like he was way up. I don't know how many times Bubka did it, but now it's finally been broken. So how high has Duplantis gone? And how high do you think they can vault, Steve? Like, how high can they go?
Mondo, I think he's jumped 20 feet, 4 inches or 4.5 now, something like that. I don't quote me for sure, but I think it's under 20 feet, 5 inches, but over 20 feet, 4. And that's just incredible. He's pretty much got everybody beat by good 10 centimeters at this point. So it's almost like there's a lot of people need to catch up, I guess. He's fast. He's fast. He ran a 10,500 meters in high school, and that was a few years ago. So I would imagine he's probably 10,300, 10,200 meters.
Wow. Yeah.
That's pretty fast, and he's been jumping since I think he has every age group record known to man. I mean, from 6 years old on. So he's like the Tiger Woods of pole vault.
That's crazy.
Who knows? He's not even that old yet either. So I could see him jumping 20 feet, 8, maybe 9, maybe 10. Maybe he'll jump 21. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's it's incredible to me. If you ever just even stood down there and then on the side of the pit level and look up at 19 plus or 20 feet and see how high that you start scratching your head and start thinking in your mind, you're thinking there's just no way any human could actually get over that. And yet they're doing it. Yeah. It's just, it's impressive.
It is. It is too, one of the most technical things that I've applied my, kinesiology background and biomechanics and all that to the jumps. And I love watching all the field events because I think they're fascinating. There's so many things going on, different forces, different implements, different styles, whatever you got going. But, watching the vault is just crazy. And then to think about, one of the things that's amazed me, like when I was vaulting, very short career at Millikan, nobody was coaching us. So I don't know. Did you know the Dave Tomlinson? Was he around when you were there? So
I know Dave, and his dad was a real well-known coach. Also, he was coaching at El Camino, and he was a good coach for some world-class guys before my brother's time. Steve Smith, the guy who recently passed away, was Dave's dad was his coach, and a lot of guys went to El Camino because of Dave's dad. He was Dick Tomlinson. That's who it was.
Yeah,
he was. Everyone would. A lot of guys went. Charlie Brown went to El Camino. A lot of people went there because of Dick
Mm-hmm.
Tomlinson. He's a good coach.
So you were in order was your brother, then you, then Dave. And Dave was, I think, also a 15-5 kind of guy in high school. I remember him doing that. He was a year in front of me. So, and I don't remember him getting coached by his dad. Maybe he was on the weekends or something, but his dad wasn't there as far as I remember. I'm sure I would have heard of it. So, and when he was vaulting, there was no reason for me to vault because I think I vaulted like 7 or 8 feet as a sophomore because they used to just leave the poles out, right? We'd come walking out, there's the poles, there's the pit. And I was like, I almost gave up high jumping for pole vaulting. It was fun. You know, I was one of those guys, like you said, like I had no idea what I was doing, but I would grab the pole and get back there and just run and hold on, you know, and swing up there and then, you know, kick over the wrong way and do whatever. But there was nobody there saying, here's how you do this. And it hadn't gotten to that point yet of watching Dave and trying to figure out what it was that he was doing. I'm sure I picked up some of those things because I'm kind of a visual learner. So I don't think I even necessarily need to analyze it sometimes as much as see it. And then you get that imprint in your brain, you kind of try to copy it, right? But it was, I mean, he was gone. And then my senior year, I did a little bit. So when I'm asking a lot of these questions, it's like, so I have a little tiny sliver of the experience, but I'm just like, I want to, you know, get the whole thing lined up from beginning to end. Like, and I'm amazed at how much there is, you know, so many things I've looked at online, you know, do these drills and do these drills. And, you know, it's like, you got straight pole drills, you got this, you got, like, you're talking about the strength to hoist yourself up. I see these people on these high bars and they swing their legs and then they invert, you know, and pull their legs straight up, you know, and I'm like, oh, that's a great drill. You know, I need to figure out how to do those, you know? So, just fascinating event to watch. So if you were gonna, what was my question? I don't know. I've always got tons of questions for you, and whenever I get a chance to talk to you, I'm always like they're crowding, they're crowding their way out of my head. Going back to your brother when he was at UCLA. He vaulted. How was his best vault? Was he in the 19s then?
He broke a world record at Pac-10s at 18.8 and 3/4, and it wasn't ratified because when they moved the standards up to measure it, the bar fell off. They put it back up, and it didn't measure the exact same height, so he did not get that world record, which was, you know, a shame. But he did break the world record indoors twice, and you know, I think he was ranked top 3 or 4 in the world for probably a decade straight. Right. You know, so
now which Olympics was it that he came in second? Was that 84 or
84 Olympics? Yeah, 84. And then he made the team in 80, but they boycotted, so that one didn't come through.
Right.
And then he was tracking pretty good for 88, and then he hurt his Achilles tendon. He was doing really well in some meets, and I think about 3 months before the trials, he had an Achilles rupture, and he was out for that one. But he was doing pretty well then. But you know, he had a good career. He was good. He was one of the best at that time. You know, this was most of his stuff was pre Bubka, you know.
Yeah.
It's funny because they kept saying, they said, well, do these Bubkas on the high bar. You know, everyone says do that. It's like, we were doing those before Bubka was even, nobody even knew who Bubka was, you know. Right. So I don't know how he got
how he got the credit.
You know, it's yeah, it's a funny event, man. There's a million different ways to do it, and some people, you know, you see that guy, like you said, that was Jason Cowick, that would drop both legs and do, you know, and he just swing to the top hand with both legs swinging, and you know, that's another way to do it, you know. And then you know, everyone has their opinion on different ways to get it done, and there's a lot of people that have jumped high a lot of different ways too, you know. Right. So it's just all I know is there are some things that are usually pretty you know, sound. One is that you gotta got to have that speed, and then you got to have some type of an efficient transfer of that speed into the pole.
Right.
That's 90% of it.
What I would call the universals, right? Like for my high jump, watching these guys, I can't think of anybody that doesn't have a really good knee drive. Now, you could argue some people leave it up. I'm like leave the knee drive up kind of guy, but I have seen some people not do it, and get up pretty high. And then, I've been one of those people who are like, hey, if you're scraping your foot on the ground, you're never going to jump that high. Right. And I was like, I even said a couple of years ago, I don't think anybody would jump higher than 7.4. I thought I was putting that way up there. Like nobody will ever do that. And I was at Mount Sac 2 years ago, and this kid who had graduated from Texas Tech was jumping against a guy from SC, and the SC kid went like 7.6, but this guy went 5.5, and he scraped his foot like nobody's business, like, and he goes up, and I'm watching him like, that's 7.5. I'm like, dang. And in my brain, I'm like going, well, if he didn't scrape his foot, maybe he jumped 7.7, but I'm like, part of me is like, I'll never know, because I was way higher than I ever jumped. And then I see this Swedish kid on my feed who made bars look low just because he was so tall. He's 6'9", but he scraped his foot over 7.7. So I'm just like, I got to change what I was thinking. One thing I was going to ask you quick before my brain forgets is one of the things that fascinates me. I don't know about you listening out there, and if you've made it with us this long, we'll check back in. This is Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. We talk about high jumping and pole vaulting and long and triple and just about anything that comes up. And I'm talking with Steve Tully, a former Arizona State product, and also more locally here, Millikan High School, which is where I went to high school. We had a tremendous connection at Millikan from Millikan guys going to UCLA. Your brother, Rory Katinik, myself, Dwayne Washington, who was a triple jumper. He and I were both seniors the same year in '82. So anyway, I brought that up, but we're talking with Steve. And one of the things that I've always found fascinating, Steve, is the fact that when people are jumping high now, the pole is nowhere near as high as where the bar is. Like when I was vaulting, I would hold at 12 feet and I was vaulting at 10, because I didn't know what I was doing, how to extend and how to swing, any of those things. I just tried to hold on and wiggle my way over at the top. But, if you've watched the event at all and you're wondering about how they can get over, that's what my brain's always wondering, is like, how high can you cast off of these poles? And then, how long can these poles get too? That's the other thing. You're talking about 21 feet. I'm like, okay, so how long are they casting off 5 feet, 4 feet? How much are they getting? So fill us in.
There's certain ways. I mean, some guys don't hold as high and use a stiffer pole and try and get more push off, 4 feet, and other guys hold really high, I mean, usually the higher you hold, the pole gives, kind of gives back more energy. Usually, it's
easier to bend too, right? If it's
there's a direct connection on how much higher you go than how much more over your grip you can go.
Right.
So if you look at some of these, they have these charts on how high you can grip, and they have a lot of different averages and stuff like that. But basically, the reason they're going more over the grip is because they're holding higher. Like Mondo. I mean, back in the old days, if you held 16 feet, it was world class. I never held that high, but to jump from 18 to 19, everyone it wasn't uncommon for guys holding, poles back in those days were 16.6, or they're those days you could hold 16.4 or 5, and then at some point they had to start making poles longer. Next thing you know, they're making 16.8, 10 poles. I'm not even sure how like long Mondo's poles now are at this point. It would be 17.2. So I mean, his poles are, quite a bit longer, and then he's definitely holding up higher on them than and therefore jumping higher than everyone else. But you got to have the speed and the technique to be able to do that.
Yeah. So. Well, that's the thing too, right? Because if the pole was stiff, if you picture that, I was picturing like how fast and strong you'd have to be if it was so stiff that it wouldn't bend, and you're holding it at 17 feet. Like you stick it in there and you jump as hard as you can, running as fast as you can. Could you even get it to swing up there, right? But if you can hold it right, that top hand extended straight up, and have this bottom hand right, and you just perfect bend. That's the big thing, right? Because you can bend and store that energy and then keep coming in. So the pole kind of cuts itself in half, right? And then it just straightens out and goes straight back up. Because the other way
Well,
takes
basically,
long, right? If you didn't bend,
that
you would like
the trick is the top hand, and then the pole hits the box, and then when you drive in, and that pole starts bending from your top hand to where the pole tip is in the box. That's called the cord.
right.
And you want to shorten that cord as much as possible, because if you get that cord short, that just means it's going to be able to roll over and go up. So that's it. Kind of determines how high you can hold.
Mm-hmm.
Long as it gets back to vertical, as long as that pole gets back to vertical, you got to keep that pole compressed. And that's kind of like I was talking to you earlier about getting that efficient run, efficient takeoff, and then the next thing is you got to swing like hell. Swing as hard as you possibly can, get that tap going, and that tap is what. Have you ever swung on a high bar that's made for gymnastics? And if you start swinging on that high bar bends, and it bends downward.
Right.
The key is that swing is pulling downward force, and that holding on that pole at the top. And when you swing really hard and tap, that pole compresses. That's what keeps that pole. That it makes that cord shorter. And that's the goal, is to get that cord shorter so you can get back in time to ride it. To get up on top of it. So it's it is a technical event. Unfortunately, it can get too technical, and people can think of too many things. You can't really think of 15 things at once. So I tend to try and work on just running and planning correctly. If you can get someone in high school just to run and plan correctly, they'll probably jump pretty decently. Because that doesn't happen very, very much. Really, it's hard to get them to do it correctly, because like here comes that fear factor again. Fear to make things not work the way your conscious mind knows what to do, but that subconscious mind with that fear factor, it's hard to get some kids to get over that, so they can do what they know they should do, instead of their conscious mind knows, okay, I know I have to do this, and then their subconscious mind with the fear just screws it all up, and they just can't seem to execute what they know what they have to do. That's why you got to do a million drills and find that guy that's crazy, that's fearless.
Right. Definite prerequisite. I find it interesting that you're bringing it up, because I've talked with so many people about that, Steve, and it's like I just say, hey, I know that the reason you're struggling with this concept is I keep telling you, and I can show you, and they see videos. I go, watch Barshim. When Barshim runs and jumps at the bar in the high jump, he's 6 feet away. He's a mile out. For most people, they're within, they can reach out and touch the plane of the bar. He's nowhere near the plane of the bar, and he's running super fast, and he hits vertical. And I said, now watch this. I said, I have never had one person in all of my years of coaching it and doing it myself run full speed, get to the plant, and jump up and not land in the pit. I said, they will invariably go and land in the pit. Now, if they pick a bad angle, they could jump out of the pit, if they're too down the bar or something like that. But if you're in the right spot, you do everything else you've been coached to do. I said, you will easily make the pit. You don't have to throw your head back. You don't have to do anything. You're going to go over there. And I said, I've actually filmed a couple of athletes that I've trained that as they're approaching, they're leaning at sometimes 30, 35 degree angles. Now they're not taking actual jumps. They were just taking pop-ups off of run-throughs, but really good run-throughs with a great lean. And they actually took off inside vertical. Like they pushed back a little bit. Now, again, they weren't jumping. They were just doing pop-ups, but their bodies would start here. They would swing up and get very close to vertical, but maybe be a little inside vertical. And darn if they didn't just keep drifting up and towards the pit, and I told them, I go, look, you're thinking that you're not going to make it. So I said, your rational mind is nodding in agreement with me, and your subconscious, well, I call it self-preservation mind. Your subconscious mind is the one that's overruling everything. It's like going, oh no, your other part of your brain's going, oh yeah, we got to get farther out. And the other part of your brain is like, oh, that's crazy. It's like, I want to go up and I want to land in that nice soft pit. And I'm going to move myself closer. He's like, go, look, when I move you farther back, I don't know if you found this, because I do, that they'll stretch their steps back out.
Yeah.
And get lower and slower, and they're right back in the same place.
That's one of the same biggest problems with the pole vault thing. I mean, they stretch that last step. It's I don't know how many coaches I've seen where, like, oh, they'll catch their step. They'll look at it and they'll say, well, you're a foot under. Let's move you back a foot. But I mean, you can't really. I mean, I don't really look at the last step that much. I kind of look at the video and like, man, well, you just took a, foot and a half long last step to get to that foot under.
Right.
So why are you going to move it back more?
Right.
If anything, they probably should have
moved a longer,
it up.
slower step. Yeah.
Yeah, we should have moved it up rather than back. I know they're a foot under.
Yeah.
If they just took a gigantic step to get to that foot under, last thing you want to do is move back further.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
It's you got to look at how they got to that takeoff point.
Yes.
Sometimes you look at that takeoff point right at the thing, that looks really good, But then if you back it up to the last three strides and look at the whole picture leading up to that, and you're like, well, he might have looked good at the takeoff, but how he got there didn't look good at all.
Right.
So
right.
Just
it's analogous to somebody just saving it all with a great knee drive or something, right? Like, or they just powered through it or did whatever they had to do, right? Because they didn't help themselves with, you're talking about that beautiful rhythm. That's one thing I remember, excuse me, being at UCLA, being around some great coaches. I was around Curran. Curran was either an assistant volunteer. I think he just graduated in 82. Like you said, you competed against him, right? So he had just graduated when I got there. So it's fall of 82, and I'm just in there fresh from Milliken, and here's this cool surfer guy who's the pole vault coach, and just totally chill and blah blah blah. And what was my point? I did this before I got started, and I started embellishing. What were we talking about?
The rhythm or something.
Rhythm.
Or other.
Thank you. Sorry. I apologize to those of you out there. I do this all the time. So I remember looking for universals. I was there with, Art Venegas, one of the best throwing coaches in the world, was there when I was there. And they were both, one of the reasons though I think I saw them so much and heard them so much is they were right next to the high jump pit. So I would see the shot putters, that year in 84 that you were talking about when your brother was on the team. He was no longer at UCLA, I don't believe, but he was, like you said, one of the best in the world for a decade. So he was getting ready for that Olympics. And then John Brenner was having an outrageous year, shot and disc, all year long, one of the tops in the nation and the world. And so I would listen to Art, talk about acceleration and speed and power through your hips and explosiveness. And, I would listen to Curran and I would hear the same things. And I'm like, well, these two events have nothing in common, not really, but in my brain and being a young, biomechanist at heart, I was looking for what I call universals. Like, what are the things that translate to everything, and it's like the basics for me are like rhythm, like you're talking about. I mean, I like to see, I'm teaching my jumpers constantly, from a 10-step approach. I'm like, I want it to be nice. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, nice and smooth. I said, you get that down, Then we can go for a little bit faster with that same rhythm, but you got to master that, right? You go through that sequence. So I've got them running, the hash marks in the stadium, set their step rhythm, at like 1 yard. It's a 3-foot step. It's not really that far, but they can go, and instead of having them go as fast as they can, which we do sometimes, for CNS stuff. But if I go, hey, let's just work on rhythm and just do your 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm like, do a bunch of those. And it's not hurting them. It's 10 yards. I'm not running that far. And then I go, okay, let's put the cones out and go to 1.5 hash marks, or then eventually 2. And I get them going up to speed and trying to do the same thing, because I see the rhythm as important. I see acceleration through whatever it is you're doing, like you said, through the pole vault, the high jump, javelin, right? So I always like hearing the confirmations, from other coaches when you say,
the last 3 strides in the pole vault is that kind of that rhythm thing you're talking about. I call it a little like a crescendo, where your feet just are, that's the part where those feet just, you shouldn't be able to hardly even see them. They're just 1, 2, 3, and you're off the ground. But, 1, 2, 3. And in the vault, it's important that when you move those hands with the pole, is that pole tip has to be at the right height, or about eye level, and then it gets to where it's almost like parallel. But if that pole tip's too high, too low, then it can mess it up. But what's important in that respect is the pole drop is letting gravity take that pole tip to the ground, to the box. If you have any weight on your front hand and you're lowering it, it tends to really screw up that crescendo at the end, the last 3, that rhythm that you're talking about. And so you got to have a weightless front hand, your left hand, if you're a right-hander.
Right.
You got to let gravity take the pole down instead of holding that pole down and just lowering it slowly to the box. You'll never get that crescendo. You'll never get that rhythm. It's a little bit different than the high jump. High jump, you don't have that implement that can cause some things to get screwed up.
Yeah,
that's an important part of the vault part.
Yeah. Well, hey, Steve, I know it's you don't have to go to work tomorrow, but some of us do.
I do at 2:30. I got to go coach, but
that's right. That's still work. It's a labor of love, right? I don't find myself in any hurry to quit coaching as much as I'm the same as you as a teacher. I have a couple more years in front of me, but I always say my real job starts when I get out to the track.
It's funny. You always, I think, I could hang it up, and then you always get a few more. You always have a couple extra kids that you're like, I got to see this guy through all the way to the end. And then all of a sudden you get another one. So it's like, well, I get, it is a labor of love, because it's once you get it in your blood when you're, it's, to me, I never really considered it anything but fun. It was just, I just loved it, and it was just fun. The only not fun part about it is getting hurt and you can't do it. That wasn't so fun, but it's frustrating, but learning how to master it. A lot of people equate it with golf. It's just, how it's very difficult to do, but when it's done right, and it's a lot of fun. There's no doubt about it. Nothing like an adrenaline rush getting launched off the top of a pole.
Yeah. Well, PRs or rushes for sure. And then, like you said, that I think there is that daredevil, crazy aspect to it, like you said. And I think that can translate a bunch of ways, not only to your own performance, but then, like you said, we can live vicariously through these young kids, right? You see them, they have a personal best vault. They do something really outstanding. We're like, yeah, all right, that came together. You did all those things we were talking about. And, you said something also that was interesting. One last thought, that you young coaches out there, when I broke down the high jump for one of my jumpers 2 years ago, Barbara came down here from Canada and we started working, and I was telling her a bunch of stuff, and she was great. She'd ask questions. She didn't just do stuff. She'd kind of push back at me a couple times. I understand. What do you mean? Why are we leaning, so hard to the left here? What do you mean heel toe? Why is that important? I'd be like, okay, well, and if you heard me talk, you'd probably hear me channeling Baru, because I would be like, I worked with Baru for a couple different years, and I'm like, well, let me tell you why, and I would tell her, and she'd be like, okay. But after a little bit of that, when I'm sending her videos, she goes, can you give me a checklist of the things that you see when I'm running through? And this is no BS. I came up with almost 2 pages of little technical things that I've noted over 30 years of coaching, where I'm like, knees up or cycling or whatever, and I made the list, and I said, now you realize you can't think about all of these. Like you were talking about, there's no way to think about these 2 pages worth of things. I'm like, we need to pick one and you drill it. You need to pick another drill for another aspect, and you drill them all, and you hope to master the drill. And then I'm hoping that it somehow almost magically becomes what it is that you do, because I can't on meet day go, okay, now remember, I want you to run tall, knees up, feet to your butt, lean to your left, run a circle, slide your inside foot across, lean back, heel toe now. Don't forget to get your arms up. You start doing that to someone and they're dead in the water.
Yeah, you know what? I try and get them to maybe do, in meets is not the time to really try and figure out how to do what you got to do. I kind of let them go, and then maybe just pick out one thing, and it usually has to do with something in the plant or in the run,
right.
Something that happens before they take off, not something, way up in the air that, I don't know how many times I look and say, oh, do something up in the air like that. And the plant was terrible, but they'll say something about, coach will say something about what they need to do up near the bar or something,
Yeah. You're like, the plant would have fixed all that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So.
All right. Well, hey, Steve, we finally got it done. I think it's been over a year in the making.
Yeah, COVID got in the way, and or something else. I don't know.
Yeah.
We tried to do this for a
I
while,
think you had COVID the other time we were going to do it. So I'm glad you're still
I've had it a couple times. I'm still kicking, so it's all right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I had it once myself. But I'll be in the loop again. I'm sure I'll end up being in your neighborhood there. One of those meets coming up, those qualifiers for the winter championships and all that. So
we got one coming up in a couple weeks, I think December something. So
yeah, Paulie's got some meets going on right now, and then that whole winter series is going to start up. So should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's starting to heat up. It's it's starting to cool down weather-wise, but the track and field is starting to, the indoor stuff coming up. And
it's going to be exciting. We got the Olympics coming up at the end of the year, so it's everything's going to go even crazier than usual. So should be a good time. Well, hey, again, thank you for spending some time with us here, Steve. And I reserve the right to drag you on here in the future if we can get it done. So,
okay.
All right, sir.
Hey, all right. It's been great.
Hey, thanks so much. I appreciate your time, man. We'll talk to you soon. I'll be out there at that meet without a doubt.
Okay, Troy. I'll see you.
All right, Steve. See you, bud.
Bye.
Bye. And that's going to wrap it up here on Raise the Bar with Troy Haines, with my special guest, Steve Tully, former Milliken High athlete, former Long Beach City College Viking, and also an Arizona State Sun Devil, and now longtime pole vault coach. So local legend here in the Long Beach area. Like I said, the Tullys are definitely legendary in the city of Long Beach, and especially at Milliken High School. And you got to hear a lot of great stories from Steve. And we look forward to having him on here again. So until next time, this is Troy Haines, and we are signing off. Be looking and listening for my next rant podcast. So I haven't figured out what the topic is yet, but as soon as I can figure out what it is that I want to rant about, we'll do another one. Until then, continue to raise the bar, and we will talk to you next time.